It is our absolute pleasure this evening to welcome Bangarra's Artistic Director and the Curator of Law, Stephen Page. Please make him welcome.
I was wondering if we...
Are we on the right side?
I think we have to swap. Yeah.
Good.
I get to have your
That's
Michael
right,
Jackson...
sorry.
The Michael Jackson jacket.
Yeah, you get the, good. You can do a bit of moonwalking.
I think that's right, isn't it? Am I meant to be on this side?
Yeah, I think that's
I'm
right.
getting the thumbs up from the
Good,
sound people. See, I'm always directing, I'm sorry.
Very good,
Yeah.
very good. So let's begin tonight by paying our respects to the Indigenous people of this country, past, present and future, on whose land we meet. Stephen is a descendant of the Nunakal and Mulunjali clan from southeast Queensland, so he's well and truly a Brisbane boy.
Freshwater, saltwater.
Freshwater, saltwater, and we talked about that yesterday. He was appointed Artistic Director of Bangarra in 1991, and he's earned numerous awards over his 25 years, a testament to his passion, talent, and I would say absolute dedication. As many of you will be aware, Stephen directed the opening and closing ceremonies for the 2000 Sydney Olympics. He was Artistic Director of the Adelaide Festival in 2004, and he was the New South Wales Australian of the Year in 2008. You're pretty impressive, Stephen. In 2015, and I'll stop in a moment, but I think if you've done all these things, you deserve to hear how great you are. In 2015, Stephen was awarded an honorary doctorate of creative arts by the University of Technology, Sydney, for his outstanding contribution to the arts and to Indigenous culture. He's worked with every company in Australia, and he's collected a formidable list of credits, including Black River, Page 8, Brand New Day, and the Sapphires. So, Stephen, you've been Artistic Director of Bangarra now since 1991, and I looked at some stats, and last year 50,000 people came to see, in your 25th anniversary year, 50,000 people came to see your work?
Yes.
And around 1,000 young people involved in your schools and community project. How do you feel about that?
Look, it's just great. I think, well, first off, thank you for welcoming me here on country. And yes, it was our 25th year, and we did set out for our 25th year was to. It's really hard. I don't know if it's the production we produced. I mean, it was a Sydney story. It was actually the William Dawes story based on Paddy Garang, the young Eora Nation girl, and so we'd sort of known about that about 18 months prior. But look, I think it's because you're a major performing arts company. You're constantly, setting a 3-year plan ahead of you, and you've got great creative people around you, team, both black and white, and you're paying homage to the past. It's a bit like what we do in our culture and our customs and our moiety systems. It's always relating what we do in our Indigenous systems that we try to apply that in this Western system and how they run parallel. And so we're always acknowledging the past, and we're saying, where are we in the future? And so we knew that we had to get back out into communities. So we did one of our biggest regional remote community tours, which was about 9 to 10 weeks. And we did a major work that was based on this young Eora woman, because we had resided in Sydney since '89. And we'd never really told a Sydney story. So I think probably just the thought process of what we were doing creative and culturally, somehow, I don't know, maybe just the message behind that, the potency behind that, just attracted a whole, well, our past audience, our loyal audience that are constantly following us and our stories, but also the newer audience. And look, we're in the 21st century now, where social media and technology is just rapid, and it's moving swifter every moment we speak. Something's probably just been invented as I've said something. But and so networking and communication is much more accessible. And But at the same time, it's hard to find your integrity to that accessibility, through that accessibility. So it was great to be really grassroots and just get back out and get into the community. So yes, 50,000 people saw our works, and that's just great. That just refuels the flame and fire within Bangarra, and it's helped us realise, it's just given us that extra energy to, to secure that stability, but also to think about the next 25 years. I mean, we're just 26 years of 40,000 years of culture. I mean, yeah.
It sort of sounds insignificant when you put it like that, but I know it's not. It's significant in that it's been 25 years of extraordinary work. I just might say, if anyone wants to tweet tonight, just hashtag, you can just hashtag QPAC chats is the hashtag. Okay, so, I mean, you were very young when you became artistic director.
Yeah.
Looking back over those years, over those 24 years, you must be a very different person. What would you say to that young man 24 years ago about where you are now? What advice would you give that young man?
Oh, that's really tough. Look, the advice I would give was that, was just that respect for elders and the sense of listening and respecting. Like, I think all those principles and values I learnt from where I was brought up with my family, my immediate family, my blood family. My mum and dad didn't have much. They had 12 kids. They come from a generation where they couldn't celebrate their culture. They couldn't celebrate their identity. They couldn't be proud of that. It was always forbidden, and
was that within the home, within your going to school? And I mean, you talk about yourself as being a yellow fella.
Well, I was the fairest out of my family, I believe. I mean, and that was always the hardest for me, because I was always told I was the milkman's son down the road by my own black brothers and sisters. So, and yet I'd cry to go and stand in the blackfella line when we'd go and get our ears checked or go to the nurse at the public school. And so I was a little bit confused and I kept going to Dad, what's going on? And but at the same time, I was always curious as a child about my identity and culture, and I was always, Mum always said that I was always the one, I never stopped talking, and I always wanted to hear more about our culture and our stories and where we came. I think it was just that fascination, that curiosity, that was just inbuilt into me from an early age. So I think when I did take over Bangarra, I had come from a college called the Aboriginal and the Dance Theatre, which is obviously NAISDA now, and it's 40 years next year. And it was a college set up, a performing arts college, where dance was the medium, but it was a college where all blackfellas would come from all over the country, and they would learn dance from all different forms, or Western forms, but the biggest injection was the Aboriginal and the Torres Strait Islander traditional forms. And at that stage, there was no crossover of modern, Western modern and traditional. You either learnt Western form or traditional. And so through that process, as a student for 3 years, I was able to meet, I just came at a good time, like it was early 80, between 80 and 83, or 81 and 84, and I was just very fortunate to meet some amazing tutors and teachers and elders, and we were all in the same boat together, and we all come from different diverse upbringings and stuff, so I was just always surrounded by this fascination of who we are as people and who I was, and I just knew I was going to work in my profession, celebrating my culture. I knew that quite young, so I just would say to that younger self, I'm glad I actually followed through those principles. And yes, look, I was arrogant and I was confident, and you are at that age, and you're cocky and you're full of that, and I learned to accept my ego at a really young age as well, and how to work with your ego in your self-ego within this industry. Yeah.
And we'll come back to that, because when we had a chat yesterday, we talked about how do you stay grounded when you are, in fact, a spokesperson now and a role model in terms of other dancers, not just Indigenous dancers, how you stay grounded. But let's come back to that. Let's talk about the works that people saw tonight, if we could. So the first piece, you know, two very different pieces, and congratulations to the choreographers. You must be very proud of them.
Oh, so proud of them, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the first piece, Ibis, and the aesthetic is very different. That Torres Strait Islander aesthetic is very clear, it's very joyful, very happy is the wrong word, just you know,
it's a celebratory
it's a celebratory piece, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I think that's just the nature of what you inhabit. There is the energy and spirit of being on the islands and in the South Pacific, and that energy.
That Melanesian.
That Melanesia, that essence, and that surviving, surrounded by the depth and the character of water, and how it shapes land, the land and water shapes the people and who they are. And I really think, you know, that's just embedded into the characters of the community and the people. And Deborah and Wanaka certainly have that in their own innate personalities. Ever since I've known them and they've been in the company, I mean, they've been very proud of where they come from, and the majority of the artists and the dancers in the company, they come to be a part of the foundation of Bangarra, to either you know, reconnect or rekindle, but then to continue their love and passion for their culture. And imagine working in your professional life, that's what you do. You live and breathe every day. You re-educate yourself. You learn about who you are as a person through your Indigenous identity. And so the Torres Strait idea and the work was purely just, you know, over a couple of years ago, thinking about these IBIS stores and the community stores, and, you know, they've obviously been a part of the culture for over 100 years, and Wani and Deb and I obviously talked about that not that long ago, probably towards the end of last year. I posed the question for them to take a challenge, and I said, because we'd been on to Mer Island, to Murray Island a couple of times, and we've taken, last year we went back to Thursday Island, we had about 600 people in the park on Thursday Island, and they came from the different islands to see Bangarra. We felt like rock stars, really. It was great. And I think what they saw was this diverse array of artists that come from both Aboriginal and Torres Strait. And the Torres Strait, Western, Eastern and Central, you know, they're all different in their principles and their custom. We all think all Aboriginals are the same, or we think all Torres Strait are the same. They're so complex and it's so diverse that you have to respect the diversity. And so I think what Bangarra did was that, because we celebrate under the one spirit of respect, or the respect of that principle for culture, for some reason we're able to bring people together. And we've been entrusted with different stories from the Torres Strait, whether they've been from Saibai or Murray Island. Obviously, Elma Chris is our senior dancer who's been in the company almost 16 years now. And, you know, we are constantly in connection with community and elders about stories that we want to tell in this contemporary way. And there's a big protocol process that we go through. So the idea for me was to continue in our repertoire, because we get to do one work a year, and so, you know, things move on quite fast, and you don't want to make your Torres Strait creative works excusable either. And I think that's what we've fed again in this country. We do celebrate two cultures, but sometimes I think we just assume that there is this, you know, there is a respect for both Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, and there's a pride amongst the people. And there's a wonderful tension amongst the people, because that's just innate, that's just what it is. And there's a wonderful respect about that. And I don't think we get to tend to talk about that a lot. And within Bangarra, we are very open about that. Yes, one might be more feisty and more warrior-like, and one might be more grounded and earth-like. And that's a great dynamic, because that just helps you understand and make you realise that we are different people, but yet we have this one goal of respecting the spirit of our culture. Anyway, telling you the longer story now. But anyway, IBIS is about community stores, and Deb and Juan was thrown the task, and they really just went away and talked about ideas and heard stories and spent some time up on the islands. And they just came back, and they, look, ideally, you know, you could have made a little short film out of it and put it in a shop and gone quite close in there. And they talked about the different sort of food source and Deb talked to her parents about earlier stories when they were there, and they used to get cans of sardines in the store that came from Spain, and yet their front yard was full of sardines and school. So just the juxtaposition of what and how that's changed over the years, and also really about there's the beautiful underline in the work where it's about turtle hunting. There's a beautiful thing about the
gorgeous costumes. I love the turtle
and the crayfish
costumes
that they store. They go out hunting for crayfish and they store it in the ibis store in the freezers. And you probably wouldn't have that at Woolworths up the street here, but it becomes there where they store food and so forth. And so they were just, I think it was just the running parallels and the juxtaposition of that, and then how they were going to sort of, I suppose, have that crossover and then present that in a structure on stage. But also it's about the environment, and I think a lot of the elders up there are realising that climate change is, water is rising, and they're so proud that they just say our culture will go underwater with our culture, and it's going to revive itself in another 100 years. The sense of what I love about Indigenous culture, and what I love about being involved, is our sense for land and the environment, and just that connection that we believe in the spirit, and the resilience that we have about that belief that there is a reviving spirit. And I suppose in Franny Shio, that's exactly the same thing.
That beautiful moment when
you can
she
be challenged by society.
That new light out on, it's quite a magical
It's the renewal
moment
of spirit that we believe in, and I suppose that's just in a lot of Western faith. There's people have different sense of religion and Christianity, and we believe in God, or we don't believe in God, and we believe in our own spirit God, and I think we just all have different terms of belief. But I know in Indigenous cultures, the God and the spirit of land is a huge importance.
So I wanted to, one of the quotes from the program, and I encourage you to read the program, it's beautifully...
And it's free.
And it's free. It's a glorious program. I liked, when talking about IBIS, that you encourage them to bring themselves to the work. And that was something I thought, if we saw on stage, when you see that truth come through, it really speaks to you.
Yeah, and I think also the dancers are really behind the creators as well. Like the dancers have always been, I mean, I was a dancer in Bangarra, and I remember dancing in my first work and then trying to direct on stage while I was dancing and telling people what to do, so they fired me from being a dancer. And
I read in a Sydney Morning Herald interview with you once that you said, I don't know if I was that good anyway.
Oh, I don't think I was that, no. I was too nervous, I was too conscious. I was a shocking performer.
I don't believe it.
But I did. My brother Russell and Fran, I used to talk to them on stage and direct them on stage while we were performing, and it used to drive them insane. I think I used to partner Fran, and I'd be asking her about what we're actually doing the next day, and she'd just be like, "That's it, I'm not dancing with you anymore on stage." So I gave up, but I must have, the dancers. Working with Juan and Deb, the dancers that we do have now at Bangarra, the 15 of them, including Juan and Deb, and it's the same with Francis. They're in there as one, and they're wanting to constantly tell these stories, and whether you start with a blank canvas and they're being task-based, and they really bring that energy and support. And if they feel the frustration in the creator or the choreographer or the storyteller that's up there conducting and curating, they really do offer up their honest energy. And I always believe, I don't really like the term choreographer. I mean, I always believe you're up there and you're working with talent and muses and energy. At the end of the day, they're the ones that have to perform and shape that work, and they go out there. I hate blowing smoke up my butt about I've created that. There's no way you can do that without the energy of the artist that you work with. And so, these artists are really loyal and they're really supportive. Don't matter how young are they or how old are they, they're there for the continuing of our stories. And you've got to think, we're one of 28 major performing arts companies in this country, and yet we can truly say and be proud of that we're the only ones that celebrate our heritage.
Absolutely, and that deserves a clap. And I always say, if you want actually to see a truly international company that represents Australia, see Bangarra. I'm just aware, I just want to let you know that there'll be some time for questions, and I've come on without my watch, so we started around the half hour, so if someone can let me know when we've talked for about 35,
You're gonna have to dance
40 minutes, yeah. That would be great, yes. But been about 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Okay, so when Stephen and I were watching the show tonight, one of the things, I came in a little late and we were watching She-Oaks, and one of the things Stephen said was, I'm just watching them connect with spirit. That's what he said to me when I came in. And I said to him, you know, dance is such a technical art form that every limb, every finger, every part of your body has to do exactly what you've been told or what you've decided as a core group that it will do. Can you tell in performance when it transcends that? When people stop worrying about the technical aspect of dancing and just absolutely connect with spirit and story?
Look, I think it's different for dancers that belong to different clans of companies,
Okay.
and different ways of storytelling. You know, obviously Fran, well, for example, I think, you know, the Torres Strait celebratory energy in its work, and it was always going to be about this domestic story, and it was going to pay homage to the tradition. And so there's a familiarity with the motif because they've learnt these traditional Torres Strait things. So in a way, there's sort of 20%, 30% there. So the technique is a familiar technique. Suppose for Juan and Deb was trying to find what is the crossover modern movement. That's the Bangarra signature modern movement that meets the Torres Strait. So for the dancer, I think there's a wonderful sense of not being comfortable, but just knowing what that movement is, and that sort of fueled them up to take the challenge on that happens in She-Oak because it's much more abstract, it's dark, it's psychologically different. The way Frances works would task space with the dancers, and a lot of their material would come back, and she would shape and mould what that is. I think you'd hope to think in your process of building the work that you always remind the dancer that the serpent journey that they're going on, okay, we're about to bump in for a week, so it's all about technical things, shaping all the other mediums and the theatrics around it. You would hope to think once they've gone through we just did a 5-week season at the Opera House, and that's a real good tester because I think with our works, I love the process that they're raw and they grow. I don't want it to be 200% on opening night. I want it to have a bit of rawness about it. I want them as individual and each one to encourage each other, whether it's a duet or a solo, or most of Bangarra, there's a lot of ensemble stuff in our works, and I think that helps the sharing of the spirit and the knowing of how you get through that sense of leaving the rehearsal room and getting on stage and being a performer. So, you know, there's a system there that we respond to, and that's a common one in theatre and performance. You do notes, you get out there, you do class, you get on stage. Yeah. But with these dancers, I think the biggest thing is that they have, as I said before, they have the culture, they have the heritage. And I think when you have story, you've got something to hang on to as a performance. So your performance ego just goes out there and tries to tap into that story, and hopefully your spirit is able to enjoy a performance. I think when you're not enjoying a performance, obviously, unless you're carrying an injury, you try to psych that out. Or you're very sick, like one of our poor old Deb has been carrying a bit of a cold and bronchitis over the last 4 days. But in a way, she said the performance and the story, and it's always like a natural healer. It's sort of like you're healing through the medicine of your art, of what you're doing. So I don't even know what I'm raving on about.
So women play a very important role in Bangarra, don't they? And the women dancers, and we saw that tonight in She-Oaks.
They're the strongest. You don't want to mess around with them either. They tell you everything. I was brought up by 6 sisters. 6 girls first, yeah.
And I guess there's that beautiful piece in She-Oak where the women are calling on the spirits to do healing, which is followed by that piece with the men.
Yeah, there's a men's male. Alma obviously plays. Well, obviously, you know, the She-Oak is to Indigenous, especially Aboriginal people, it's the grandmother tree of knowledge, and it's symbolism, and it's the carrier of knowledge, and it's the one that culturally breastfeeds the knowledge to generations. And So I think that was very clear in Fran's mind, that the women of the company through generations will be the carrier and the healers, and they still would go through the challenges of what they're opposed to, but they'd always come out with the sense of believing and the sense of hope and the resilience, and they'd have all those strengths. The men have it, but then they're the shields. They're the ones up the front that will take the spear, and that they will take it for the women, and they will bear those sorts of challenges. And I think, you know, you see that in communities today in the 21st century. You see those poisons and those dysfunctional challenges socially that communities have, especially in regional and remote areas, because there's a foot in both worlds. There's a foot of wanting to hang on to your cultural practices, and yet you're challenged by these 21st century evolving modern temptations that really do challenge you. But at the end of the day, I think the women are the ones that constantly are there to give them that sense of resilience and that strength to actually know that the spirit of the culture will always be there. And yeah, that's always the belief. So can once again, I went off track again, but anyway.
No, that's wonderful. So can you talk about, I mean, I guess what the piece said to me was, in terms of the dysfunctionality of the poisons and how that's affected community, particularly men in community, and the role that a piece of art like that actually plays to the to us in the wider community. I think I said this to you. I can remember Wesley Enoch, Queensland Theatre Company Artistic Director, said to me many, many years ago when we were at the National Gallery and we were looking at the burial poles there. And I can remember him saying to me, the only way back for our people out of the poisons is through culture. Yeah. And I guess that's your life journey.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, I don't think we'd be doing what we'd be doing if that wasn't sort of, I suppose that's the purpose behind the challenge. I think you constantly want to be the caretaker of your stories, continue your stories, be challenged by what you're faced up against in terms of the challenges, and always be hungry to be open to those challenges as well. And that's the beautiful thing about art and music and performance is it's like contemporary ceremony. They're really good. They're great natural medicines, and they're a great way to communicate. It's another form of language. You know, I think we should get everyone in Parliament to come and see a Bangarra show.
Which is the beautiful segue. I want to ask you: have you ever thought about a life outside of Bangarra? Have you ever thought about the healing that you offer to white and Indigenous culture? Have you ever thought about a political career or
No, because I don't think I'd be good at it. I'm only good in what I do is because it's something that's a contemporary practice, and it's based on my traditions and storytelling, and it's something that I think if you, in your fate in your life, if you know that's your calling. I've just been fortunate that I've had the right people around me to guide me and to allow me to fall over and get back up, and I've just always had great support, you know, and I've had a really good spirit around me that's just allowed me to do what I want to do, and there's no way I would leave the arts. I mean, even
well, we're relieved to hear that.
No. Look. I think, but our job is though, is to, as we get older and as we become, I always say young contemporary elders, but there's no such thing, you know, when we do become those contemporary voices in our own right to lead both black and white, we do have to communicate this message constantly to the political clan, and I think that's the importance, is making sure that language is translated and it's understood, and especially if they're hearing and that you're understanding as well.
Yeah. So what frightens you?
Frightens me. My son going to Hollywood? No.
I thought you were looking forward to him building you a granny flat in the backyard.
Oh, right. Him becoming like the Aboriginal Tom Cruise. No, maybe I don't. No, maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't want him to become Tom Cruise.
People may not know that Stephen's son Hunter is a star in his own right. What's he done recently?
He's a big poser, like his father. He's actually in Europe at the moment, but he's been fortunate to have look, he grew up on stage at Bangarra, and he's fortunate to work with Wayne Blair and in short films, and he was in Sapphires and Brand New Day, and he's done a bit of television, he's done a bit of plays, acting. He's not always played Indigenous roles. He's played non-Indigenous, outside the Indigenous sort of stereotype, and so he's been very fortunate.
So you're a very proud father.
So he's got a strong mother, and she, she's a Pilates instructor. So she constantly, he's got an American passport and he's got an Australian passport. He's got the best of both worlds. Yeah. But look, I think what frightens me really is not so much about me and myself or my son. I think what frightens me for me is this caring of our knowledge and our culture, and I worry now in a lot of these communities where cultural practices are falling apart. I don't think we talk about that enough. It's okay to go in and talk about social systems within communities and how they're breaking down, but I don't think we're able to articulate and communicate the importance of customs and moieties and how knowledge is maintained in communities, why men's business and women's business are stopped being practicing. I think language is really isolating itself and not being passed on properly in generations. I mean, I remember in the early 80s, there was a woman's language that only women spoke in Yolngu language, and you don't hear about that anymore because generations are changing and attitudes are changing, and that pass of culture and knowledge is really hanging on by this strong, long thread, but it needs a lot of work to be looked after. So what I get frightened of is, just the leadership and the caretaking of that and the maintenance behind that, because that's a huge importance to our society.
Yes, for
all of us.
For all of us, and that loss of ritual and those losses.
But that's been the way that
we're
communicating, whether it's been through the Bark petition, whether it's been through the referendum. I mean, you look at Recognise now, that's purely based on all those customs and all those principles. That's fantastic.
I want to get back to this notion of being grounded, because there are quite a group of you now: the Wayne Blairs, the Deborah Mailmans, the Stephen Page, the David Page, the Francis Rings. I mean, you're an elite, really, in terms of black culture, and you're big stars. How do you stay grounded? Do you get together and talk about what it means to be famous?
I know that we're always aware when we see each other, especially in Sydney. We're always aware. And look, I'm not on social networks, so I think they have more advantage than me. I think they're all on Facebook and stuff. But we catch up with each other. We're aware. I mean, the industry, the mainstream in Sydney, it's quite small. But we're always in touch. But the other thing too is that when we do get in touch, we're always, the older we get, we're always talking about the same importance, and that is where we come from and who we are. And, they all have immediate families that they go home. I mean, every black fellow has a big family, and you get home and you get caught up in that humbug, and that really grounds you, They knock you down before you have a big head and you're out there in the mainstream. But at the same time, I think there's a wonderful... I think, we're always paying respect for the people before us as well, the ones who have set up black theatre, the ones that have been out there before us and, have really paved the ways. It's about those pathways that those storytellers before us have laid down that concrete for us to sustain what we're doing. And that's why I think now it's really important that I love, 26 years of Bangarra. I love the fact that we have, a good bunch of, half a dozen storytellers now within the company. We have an education arm now that is run by senior dancers that have retired from Bangarra that are running those programs. We'll have a small postgraduate company next year starting, and I just love the fact that we're nurturing and mentoring and building these developments within the foundation of Bangarra, and that is also an attitude that I notice in Wayne Blair. Even though he's out there and he's directing around the world, he's always talking about the Indigenous stories is what's got him there, the rekindling of our Indigenous stories, the way that's constantly fed us, and that's what's grounded us, I think.
Okay, I think we might ask some questions or open it up for questions. Does anyone... There's a question there, right in the middle.
You must be tired, eh?
Just, one of the nice things is if you could just say your name so that Stephen can respond to you by name. There's a microphone coming.
Oh, hi, Ben. I know Ben. He just taught my company today.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
G'day. I just wanted to ask about she oak, if there's any more details you can give us, like stories or dreaming, about the she oak tree in particular, as opposed to other like long-lived trees like bottle tree or red cedar.
Oh, look, I don't think Fran was too literal about let's break the she oak tree down and let's be base. And I think she was running the symbolism and what the idea of the carrier of the she oak tree was, and then relating that to more the human, the Aboriginal side of how that affects the parallel of that of us as people. And I know she broke the pieces up into place, body, and spirit, and it was always about the symbolism, and then it was always about how body and how over generations we've been affected by the breaking down of that custom or that kinship or what lies within the root of that tree. I mean, you look at any tree. Trees are quite symbolically universal. You know, what do you have in Western system? You have your, I was going to say ancestry trees or whatever they talk about. What is it?
What is it called when you have a legend, when you have a shield? What's it? Genealogy. Genealogy,
yeah. There's a similarity within that universally. To tell you the truth, Fran personally would talk. She probably gave a lot more out this time than she usually has in her previous work. She tries to keep a lot of things quite personal and just sort of gives these bubbles of what she's researched, and she did have the whole idea of she oak came from her about the rekindling, reconnection of the mob down the south, the Yuin mob further down where she used to live down the south coast, and how they're rejuvenating some of their bark tree engravings, and how they're teaching the next generation to bring that back. And I think she was just talking about generational practices that had been lost, and that was the first inspiration. And so I think she just took the she oak, and then she wanted to build these worlds of place, body, and spirit. And obviously, body was the more sort of destructive world of how do you hang on to that spirit, which is the last world, is really about the rejuvenating of that last little stem of spirit that's in the bottom of the trunk of the tree that somehow is able to rejuvenate it and survive itself. So I don't know if I'm explaining that well. I just go along with, you know, and that's the other thing too. I think we spend in our Western society trying to understand every little bit of detail, and sometimes I just think it's always great just to accept the organic, raw spirit of how things evolved. And those practices in Western society, sometimes they wring the spirit out of a lot of things because we tend to sort of, you know, in the academic world or whatever, we just want to break everything down. We want to tick a box and we want to just isolate and strangle it until there's no spirit left. And in our Indigenous cultures, it's just purely about accepting how you go. I remember being up in Darlingboy, and one of my younger dancers is a city girl, and she was in the bush, and she turned to me, and she was like a 3-year-old, and she said, "No one talks around here." And I said, "Yeah, that's right. They have respect for the land, and they let the birds talk more than the people." And, you know, and it was just interesting about land shaping people and how we listen, how we are, and how we respond, and even how community responds to Western time. You know, like we have to manage, we're the link between the modern and the traditional, and we're like that when we go in the community. You can't force those sorts of systems on. I don't know why I'm talking about it, but those sorts of things are a huge part of trying to understand what is the breakdown that stems from branch, bark, trunk to root of a tree, and you just know it's all grounded and it's all connected, and it goes on for thousands of years.
But
hello, Stephen, Beverly's my name. It brings me a question about you going out to communities with Bangarra and working with communities, which I think is fantastic. Are you getting any of those people out in communities? Are any of those people coming in and being able to be part of Bangarra, or are you finding mainly your performers are people from the city? Are you?
Oh no, we've well, the majority of our performers do come much more from an urban city environment. I know it's really, you know, Jakapura Manyayan was a part of Bangarra, him and his sister, in the early 90s, the late 80s, when Bangarra first started, and they had to uproot from the community and come down. And Jakapura was with us for 10 years. I believe the continuation of uprooting traditional students or interests coming from the communities and bringing them there, there's a big caretaking within that. And at first, they're trying to get them through the first stages of you know, the whole education and getting them into good schools and good colleges. So in terms of, you know, we'd like to think that we can work with a diverse range of who we are as people, and you know, our interests for more, what we just say, remote communities is there. We've always worked with them as guest caretakers of their traditional stories, because really that's where it belongs. I can't go out there and tell them how to dance because they've been doing it since they were in their mother's womb, you know. Yeah, that's an interesting thing you talk about that, because I often, someone said to me, "Oh, you are a romantic black," and that stuck with me forever, and it made me think, well, what is it that we're not traditional enough, or we come from a culture that was assimilated from its culture, and where generations weren't allowed to celebrate it, but yet we're a generation that want to reconnect and revive that culture. So we're living in a time where you're going to have a lot of generations reviving and reconnecting. Yes, we have a lot of living language and song and dance that's still practiced in communities, but at the moment, you know, we go back and we share that with those communities, because in those communities, a lot of those, as I said before, those practices aren't still being practiced. You know, they're breaking down. So in a way, Bangarra's, I don't want to say it's a bit like a Band-Aid company, but it sort of feels like it's in the middle somewhere, and it's just trying to have a foot in both worlds and have a respect for both worlds. And
it's the true nature, thank you, the true nature of art does have a healing component to it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah. Other questions? There's one down here. Yep. Just wait for the mic if you wouldn't mind, just so everyone can hear the question.
Hi, Stephen. My name's Joel. I was actually fortunate enough to be bring some of the young people from a community to Yulara last year. And
we're in Yulara. Yeah.
You guys. I just wanted to find out whether some of the dances that the older people taught in Yulara last year might feature in some of the shows coming up down the track.
Oh, look, I've always had, especially from the Central Desert women, when I worked with a lot of Pitjantjatjara and Yakatjara women, they all, what was beautiful about that time, because there was about 400 Central Desert women that came down for the Sydney Olympics that I directed for, alongside with Rhoda Roberts, but mainly with Bangarra dancers coordinating, and a lot of the elderly women there who wanted to be a part of the Sydney Olympics, wanted to bring their present and their song and dance from that. Now this is back in 2000, obviously that's when the Olympics was, Stephen, hello. But 2000, that's 15 years ago, and we've gone back probably twice over those 15 years back to those families throughout Ernabella and Omawa, and we were there in Yulara, and a lot of some of those elderly women have passed on now. But what's beautiful is their children and their children know who we are as a company and what we did with the women, and Inma dance is such a big part, and they're losing that. And so for us to go in there and to share our dance with their dance, and because a lot of the kids now think they have to be 90 years old to dance. And they go, no, that's for old women, that's for you old fellas. And they're saying, well, how do we learn it? So in a way, they like bringing Bangarra in to say that dance is a huge part of their culture. So, yeah. Yeah, and then look, we don't get big resolutions out of those experiences, but it's the great common language that we have is connecting through dance, and that's great. And I suppose that's what they do in sport. Sport's a bit like dance, isn't it?
So there's a question right up the top there.
I get really insecure. I think people are like leaving because they like, oh, this guy just raves on, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, no, you
Who's this mad
You're
guy?
doing very beautifully.
Yeah.
Thank
Hello,
you.
my name is Naomi. I'm a dance teacher at a Logan school, and someone's auntie knows you. And
I've got a lot of,
exciting.
yeah.
I was like, oh my God,
I got stopped down the street the other day, goes, hey, cuz, how you going? I said, oh, g'day. I don't know if that's my cousin, but it must be. No, I'm not joking.
It's great. I have a question in terms of what Bangarra was like in the early years. How was it for you to set it up? What challenges, what successes did you have?
Oh, Lord.
Sorry.
I'm saying, oh, Lord, in a good way. Yeah, look, as I said before, it's just all the different people that worked around me at the time, and those that come, the energies that come from communities that just believed in the vision. And, my brothers, Russell and David, are very instrumental, and, the Yungal mob and the Saibai mob, there's a lot of people around wanting to feed the vision that was Bangarra, and in a way, they really just, I don't think I had any negativity about wanting to lead. I was always surrounded by optimism and positive energy, and I thrive on it as well. Like, I wake up in the morning, and if I've got an energy thought in my, a negative thought in my head, I'm like a madman. I'm like, hey, get away from me. You come from a Western world, get away, or, you're evil. And so I've just been fortunate just to be around really good. And yes, we fall over and we learn and we challenge us, but we somehow embrace those challenges. I like to think that we embrace them and then try to put it through creativity and heal through learning and creating, and then always going to dance. So the early days were really based on just our energies and coming together. And then obviously, if you're getting funded by the government and you come from a project base and then you become a major performing arts company, because we started in 89 and by 95 we were a major performing arts company. And so, maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe it was a little bit later, roughly 95, 96. And, I was probably in my just 28 or 29 or something, and they said, are you able to lead this company? And so, straight away, you've got to get everything right. You've got to make sure the governance of your company's right. And, but anyway, great people around me, always there. And I just think, they've come in and people have come and given their energy, believed in the vision, the spirit of Bangarra, and, and it's still surviving today. And as I said before, we've got, a good clan of choreographers. We've got an education program where the company has had about 130 dancers that have passed through. We've had dancers that have left and gone back into their communities. We're starting a professional development scholarship for dancers that are, in their senior years that want to not just work in dance, but want to work in other professions. So it's just really beautiful knowing that you can feed and mentor and allow the spirit of the company to just let these initiatives just grow. And I reckon we're probably going to be around another 26 years, I hope. It doesn't matter if I'm not leading it or not. There's a great, succession of artists that are around me that all have embellished the cultural philosophy that is Bangarra. So, yeah.
One last, yep, you're the lucky last. So, is there a microphone? Thank you. Oh.
Hi, Stephen. My name's Natasha. I've been seeing Bangarra for 10 years now, from when I was at university and shows through, and there's obviously
What was the first work? No.
I saw Salt.
That was Australian Ballet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've seen Terrain in Canberra.
Yep.
And Black when I was in Sydney.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't testing you. I was just like...
But you're doing very well.
I was just trying to...
Well.
Yeah.
So obviously, and I always see there's a lot of constants in the ensemble and the solos and the works that come through. Obviously seeing in kind of mainstream Western popular films like Sapphires or the ABC releasing black comedy last year as well. So I was just wondering more about the future directions of Bangarra.
Yeah, that's a great question.
There's many stories to tell from the dancers and those traditional, but where you see those modern takes and that kind of idea of, Indigenous people will have a laugh at themselves as well, and that, where that kind of fits in.
We've been dying to do a comedy. And look, we've had the times where we've been allowed to show a sense of humour and comedy have been through probably our more black social issue inspired works, where we actually put the sense of humour in it. And it could be dark humour depending how you look at it. But look, we do sometimes get back there and go, oh, we should just do our Aboriginal version of Fame, the musical, and call it Shame. And my dancers have the best creative minds. They're always going off the sort of Bangarra religious, creative license line and creating many, many different works in their heads. We've got to be careful because, at some stage we'd love to do a musical. They're probably laughing back there because they're probably saying, yeah, we wanted to call a musical, sorry, the musical. But look, but there's lots of humour that gets practiced and lots of jokes. And look, you got to remember these dancers come from all over the country and they live and breathe with each other each day. I mean, they're up at 8:30 getting ready to come into work to start their Pilates and their yoga and their contemporary class or their ballet, and then they're in there learning about a story and going to the knowledge ground area where they're looking at the 35-year works of different works that have been done, and there's different younger ones to mid ones to senior ones, and they're constantly sharing and relearning and always educating themselves about their own culture, and that's just absorbing as it is, and so yes, there is a lot of stories to tell. Can we cross over into different genres? Probably, and that's probably in the future sort of creators that are within Bangarra, but then in saying that, just going out there and doing works that don't involve Indigenous stories, they've all had a taste of expressing that as well. I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but
yes, you did.
But anyway.
You did. You're talking about
one day we might have fun. Yeah, but there's fun in some of these shows. Yeah.
Look, I'm incredibly impressed with the young people who are in the audience tonight. Very young people who've been here and stayed till the end. So well done.
They had no choice. Their parents are like,
but they've been great.
I want to go home. I'm hungry. I would have went home ages ago now.
Stephen, I know that the chief executive of QPAC, John Kotsis, has always been a great supporter, and I know
QPAC,
Janelle Christophas, who's the producer, has been with you since the beginning, and Brisbane has always loved you and embraced you, and this was an extra show that was put on tonight. And
Law is the biggest selling season in Brisbane so far in our history. So it's just great. And we love this venue, and we love coming back on country back in Brisbane. And I think a good 70% of our dancers are Queenslanders. It's great when we have State of Origin in Sydney.
I know you'll continue to support Bangarra, and I guess tonight you've had a first-hand experience of the wisdom that sits within this human being. And he's not only important for black culture in Australia, but he's important for all of us white people who live here, and the respect that you have for the oldest inhabitants of Australia, and the work that you bring to help us have deeper understanding of that makes you truly a national person of importance, Stephen. So congratulations on your career. And thank you for spending time with us.
No, thank you, and thank you all for coming. And tell all your friends, come and see the show. I think we've got a few shows left, and also we have a feature film that we shot in February this year. That was part of the Adelaide International Film Festival initiative, where film producers work with Performing Arts Company, and I got to work with Arena Media, and the film's actually called Spear. I think Andrew Bolt would like that. Alan Jones might even like it more.
And I believe it's just been accepted into the Toronto
Oh, well, we
Film
can't
Festival.
say that because it's been embargoed.
Embargoed.
But anyway, she just said it's got accepted in Toronto.
Anyway,
but it'll be
somewhere.
out early next year. It'll have a national release, I think, about 3 weeks release at the sort of more independent theatres. But the film's called Spear. It's a Bangarra feature film, 80 minutes. And you're going to say to me, what is it about? Well, my son's in it. Of course he's in it. My whole family's in it. No. Well, they are. My Bangarra family's in it, and it's actually inspired by the work we did Spear in 2000 with Archie Roach and Wayne Blair and Jakapura, and we have creative female characters within the work. So it's a sort of a new form hybrid dance, not shot on stage but on location, and have you ready for the experience. Yeah.
Good. All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.